You join the channel here over on Subscribe Star. So I know a video on Disney and Christianity is going to get about 79 views. It's just not something designed to catch eyeballs. But I think it's also a critically important video because even if you're not Christian, even if you're like pagan atheist or hashtag our guys, where some of them are like on the further right you go, they get kind of into other stuff, other type of spirituality. An attack on Christianity is an attack on the stability of a nation. It's an attack on us. And you also like, hey, countries don't last forever. They go about 200 something years and then they reform. And you also kind of know like when the S hits the fan, you know who is going to be on your side. It's like the side of stability and order. The conservative who asks why a fence is in place before you tear it down. So they've got a Christian theme in one of their stories of this processional, where they're talking about the story of Christianity. Fine, it's like tell the story or don't tell the story, but what they're doing is different, and it's why I'm making the video. It's this slow subversion and corruption of Christianity. It's kind of the final end stage of what you've seen in the media over the past 50 years, where they slowly, like, you can brainwash, multi-generational brainwashing through government schools in the media, since post World War II. You're seeing it. It shows you the power. Like, you can brainwash anyone out of anything if you allow like brainwashers into a system. Then eventually they'll seize control and destroy the system. The thing isn't to counter the brainwashing, it's to remove it from the system itself. So what happened? The Walt Disney Company attacks Christianity. Yeah, it's been doing that for a while. It rejects the divinity of Christ by radically altering the festival candlelight processional. So what happened was there's a long lead up. There's a long lead up to this with Bob Chapek and Iger. Yeah, nothing they say matters because they're both on the same page together. And they're talking about the Florida and the DeSantis, the anti-grooming bill and all that kind of nonsense, and Disney deciding to inject themselves into it. And then they start getting into the slow corruption and subversion of Disney. And this was a fascinating Zoom call. I did a video on this too, and it's either I'm not able to present it because I'm not an expert on Christianity, but it's like they do a lot of this stuff and the data is out there. And it would be sweet if maybe other channels are doing this stuff. I'm just not aware of it. To hear this woman on this Zoom call talk about like, well, she's 50 and she wants attention, so she's talking about her kids being, BLT furry otherkin type of stuff. That's the rough interpretation. You say, oh, how dare you exaggerate this woman's own personal story? Then you listen to her, you're like, oh, I guess you're pretty much right. Like, left or right, you can admit there's a lot of cringe. There's a lot of cringe farming to be had on the left and the right. So they go through Disney and the history of, if you have a diversity and inclusion manager at wherever, your company is going to suffer because of it. Lately in tech, they've been firing. Elon Musk kind of led the way with Twitter. They've been firing that kind of human resources diversity stuff at the top because it's top heavy, and it doesn't result. It actually costs the company money. It's done for ideological purposes. It's a religion, as I've been saying for years. It's a religion. It's literally a religion to these people. It's a system of beliefs. It doesn't result in return on investment. They're doing it because it's their new god, their Luciferian worship. But when you start firing these people, it turns out the productive. It's like you're getting rid of the political commissars. The productivity of the company goes up. So they're degendering the language. They're going through Disney. All that kind of stuff is nonsense because it forces people to come to the conclusion, to look at it and go, but you have this belief that there are something more than ladies and gentlemen, but I know they're not. So it kind of forces people into a binary, no pun intended, of you're saying things that are not in accord with reality, and you want me to accept these absurdities, and I kind of suspect atrocities are coming down the line. Looks around, puts on the nightmare glasses, and go, nothing's changed. Oh, the atrocities are actually happening right now. What are you talking about? Those blockers are reversible. No, they're not. Puberty is a limited window. It's a discrete limited window. Say it's a 10-year window. When you remove any time from that window, you don't get that time back. You can go back and remove the blockers, and you'll have the remaining time. But no, you cannot come off blockers at 25 and suddenly restart puberty. That's like, you should know that if you're these BLT kids on Twitter who are saying this kind of nonsense, and you look at them and like, you shouldn't even have a phone. Like the fact that the society is allowing kids to get on social media. It's like, oh, there's. I look at that and I go, I can come to the conclusion there's no fixing this. Almost instantly, because you see how ubiquitous the phone is, the social media is, and the narrative. You go, there's no way to counter the narrative. The only way you can do it is like separate off into a sub society where they just don't have access to this kind of. You can't have a society where they have 10 hours a day of global subversive propaganda and think you're going to counter it with 1 hour of family time and like going to church on Wednesdays and Sundays. It's impossible to counter. They have the electronic propagandists in their hand at all times. You can't beat that when they've got the Kardashians on TV or whatever the equivalent is pushing whatever globalist values they want to push. The only way to beat that is to remove yourself from it. And you can't do it as an individual family. It's easier to team up with other families and like form your own society, your own neighborhood, your own state, your own country. Yeah, you guys will need a lot of other things too. Okay, so let's look at. Oh, before I get into the Christian thing, so they're bringing BLT stuff to kids. It's BLT 101 for kids. That's the values of Disney now. So have you seen enough of this stuff? You have to kind of come to the conclusion. Oh, this is the tool of the Antichrist. Religious or not, you can say if you're religious, you go, it's the tool of the Antichrist. If you're secular, you go, this is the globalist tool. And it's like, as it turns out, it's a flip side of the same coin. So what happened was you had celebrity narrators go through this skit and talk about the history of Christianity, the Prince of Peace, all the armies ever marched, all the kings ever reigned have not affected the life of men on this earth as much as that one solitary life, talking about Jesus Christ. In the new version, you have a non-Christian tell the story of Christ, sans the divinity and the duality of Christ God, or maybe the Trinity to tell the story, to turn Christ into a social worker, which is what they've been trying to do for a long time. And you think, oh, my religion is stronger. Nothing beats 10 hours a day of propaganda. It's not in your lifetime propaganda. You listen, propaganda is not going to work on somebody who's over 30 or even over 25 who's got a good foundation. Propaganda works from 5 to 15. It's multi-generational propaganda to move the window piece by piece. And like government schools and globalist controlled media, there's no beating that from within the system. They are too entrenched. You're not going to solve that with whatever normie mainstream politicians you think are representing you, because they are con ops. By that I mean they won't go outside of their limited spectrum of allowable beliefs. As you saw with MTG selling out of political activists, who is a millimeter to the right of her, and she immediately turned on him. And the only thing she should have said was, oh, hey, I might not agree with his viewpoints and I'm not going to address them, but I respect his right to free speech. And I think we can all come together and say we all respect the right to free speech. And when you have right-wing politicians doing anything but that, I can look at that, and it's not hyperbolic to say, oh, there's no fixing this within the system if they won't defend the absolute core foundation of the Republic is going to be literally the First Amendment and the 5 articles of the First Amendment. And you don't hear. I'm going to do a video on the Steven Crowder, like the conservative right, next. But like politicians should be coming out very, very strongly for free speech, and they're not. So there's that. So anyway, so this Shang-Chi guy who made this movie that bombed, or it might break even, barely, but he's a weirdo. He said something weird about Nicki Minaj, like he didn't know his place in the world. He thinks he's a POC and he doesn't understand his place on the hierarchy. He's a hair above people of European descent, just a hair. They're the only group that he can dehumanize and degrade. Everyone else is above him, and he doesn't understand that. He thinks it's a binary and it's POC versus people of the light. No, it's a spectrum, and he's just right there with the people of the light. In fact, the woke narrative now is to turn them into the people of the light, the binary between POCs, because they need to, like, everything they do is everything the globalists do. That's the tall grass theory to foment discord. Grow the tall grass, get as many distractions as you can so that the people are fighting amongst themselves so they don't notice what's actually going on. So the Shang-Chi guy It says, for all the miracles of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace himself was simply a man, a human being, and he walked through the world in the most human way possible with love. Okay, so the first sentence, the miracles of Christ, you're accepting the divine God Christ. The miracles was simply a man. So you're you can explain that by discussing the duality of God and man, but you can't let that statement hang, because even if you're not religious, you can go, wait a minute. So this dirty old hippie guy who was walking around perform miracles, but he's a man. Like, would you like to clean that sentence up a little bit? Did you misspeak? And I'm not saying I'm not saying you're doing something weird. I'm like the Shang guy. He's a useful idiot. Like he got in a little argument with Bob Chapek online, and then he had a Reddit post dealing with really abhorrent stuff, and he wasn't. No, I'm not saying he was involved in it. Nothing like that. But I mean, he's got some kind of like borderline personality disorder where he's not able to read the room and understand that you're a public figure. You just can't talk about the kind of stuff he was talking about in that. If you look up his name in the Reddit post, it'll come up. And he's like, he wasn't pushing it. He was just discussing it. You're a public figure. You can't discuss that kind of stuff. You can't talk about Nicki Minaj in anything other than glowing praise. Like, he doesn't get Hollywood. And then, like, you talked about Bob Chapek and about, like, he misunderstood what he was saying. It's like, Bob Chapek was Bob Chapek at the time. You're just kind of a grade B, grade C actor. Like, you got to let this stuff go by. And he didn't, like, he didn't understand. He's kind of a weird guy, so I kind of think he's kind of a useful idiot. So you turned Jesus Christ into a social worker, dirty hippie. Okay. But perform miracles, but he's also a man. It doesn't make sense. He didn't have much, but what he did have, he shared and became plenty: food, water, shelter, care. He met the world with empathy, gave food from his plate, thirst from his own cup, saw sickness, and offered his time for their healing, soothed them with his human hands. Okay, you mentioned human quite a few times, but you're also alluding to the miracles of wine, fish, bread, and then curing illness. Literally raising the dead in some cases. And as someone in the comments points out, they're going like, why didn't he just go around curing sickness nonstop? Because his never traveled 200 miles from his home. His job wasn't to cure sickness. His job was to redeem the planet. So if he had to perform a few miracles to get that point across, he did. But his job wasn't there just to make people physically well. It's like there's to save the spirit of billions of people, at least according to the religion itself. Like, even if you're not religious, you should be familiar with the New Testament. It's like you should be familiar with the basic religions of humanity to know, like, none of this makes sense. You're alluding to the miracles that he performed, and you're saying he's just a social worker. He shared the food from his plate. Well, that's not exactly true. That's not what the loaves of bread, the fish, and the wine, and curing sickness. He offered his time for their healing. Would you like to explain that? How did he do that? He performed miracles, but he was just a man. None of that makes sense. Jesus Christ. So, I mean, this is the most nerfed. It's not nerf. Nerf is too benign. This is subversive and corrupt. To like either tell the story of Christianity or don't tell the story, but don't do this kind of subversion and corruption. Which is why I made the video, because it's so dirty what they're doing. He found his earthly... Okay, this is fucking weird. This is just... You're saying he's human, like, over and over again and talking about his earthly heart, but you don't talk about the divinity of Christ. A baby could grow up to be a man. Okay, this is fucking weird. This is so disgusting. You look at Disney. Listen, Disney is run by... Disney's not run by Christians. And if you have Christians who are... Like, no, the board members are not Christians. Nobody at Disney is a Christian. Nobody with any power is a Christian at Disney. And if you have globalists in charge of a company, well, so what's the limit for globalism? What's Christians or even tribalists, Euro tribalist pagan types, they have a core, they have a dogma, belief system they believe in. You look at the Bolsheviks on the left, these like who've turned America into a commercial entity. You go, so what's your dogma? What's your belief system? And the real belief system for the globalists is to destroy the nations. They do that by destroying the family and pushing all this BLT furry otherkin, and giving kids way too much energy, way too much agency. And you do that by the cell phone and social media, and pushing all these nonsense beliefs onto kids. Like the most influential time of someone's life is about 5 to 15. You can just push this brainwash as much as possible. That's the goal of Disney. You go, so what will you stop at? Well, where are we now? Where are we now? You've got armed Antifa, as is the right. Is your right to be armed defending Drag Queen Story Hour. That's not an argument for me. Defending Drag Queen Story Hour. And again, it's like that's their right to do that. It's parents' right to do that. Um, but that's where we are now. So however you feel about it, I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm saying that's where we are. You have armed Bolsheviks defending child grooming. So like any other period, two periods I can think of at least, one 80 years ago and one 4,000 years ago, I think, that kind of come to mind. I mean, remarkable similarity. It's and you know it's probably no shortage of stories like that. So so this, I mean, the story of Disney is like the story of National Geographic. Is like the story of women's magazines over the years. It's the slow, insidious subversion and corruption of the tentacles of the globalists to destroy anything and corrupt anything they touch, destroy the family, that destroys the tribe, it destroys the neighborhood, the state, the nation. You turn it into nothing more than a commercial zone run by big tech and bankers and special interest groups. Like you're run by NGOs. The whole country is just run by NGOs. It's like, you could take that power back anytime you wanted to, if you wanted to, but it's not going to come from an external, you know, no pun intended, the external messiah complex of looking to politicians like that. The guy in Florida, he's so based and chat pilled, except when he restricted free speech. Oh, what about that Trump guy? Yeah, he restricted free speech too, and also like First Amendment, Second Amendment. Oh, we're going to close churches, but not BLM marches. Oh, okay. That's, I mean, like that kind of should have been that would have been a I mean, there's some things to go to bat for, and like the obvious hypocrisy of that kind of thing. So I mean, my point is like, no, it has to be a grassroots, ground up kind of thing if you want to affect change. Because nobody in office is like everyone in office. You look at them left or right, left or right. They're not your guys. They're not representing anyone's interest. Anyway, this whole thing, you can read this on Bounty to Comics. Talking like repeatedly calling him human man, human hands, just a man. God, that's so fucking creepy. Like even if you're not Christian, you can look at this and go, you know, this is an attack on us. This is an attack on the stability of a nation to remove institutions that worked, tear the fence down. Well, why is the fence in place? Why is the fence in place? Before you tear it down, like what's the fence in place for? Oh, that's like Nazi said what? Yeah, just ordinary, reasonable, rational questions are like literally Hugo Boss. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys all next episode.